The mind then has access to different amount of God's mind and what we might call the subconscious, maybe a preoccupation and awareness of a selection of thoughts that are, for instance, not conscious and aware of God, perhaps not conscious and aware of much of your waking life. They might borrow various, may overlap such, and may overlap, of course, in some measure, previous selection of consciousness of God's thoughts, may have an awareness of something extraordinary that you're not normally conscious of in waking life, and not just in a negative, unpleasant way, but in a lovely way, godly way. And we might refer to such as superconscious type experience. And we might label it therefore as less of a dream and more of a vision. And you wake up from whatever you've been preoccupied with in the consciousness during the sleep, to the degree that you have memory of it. You wake up with shall we say, an interest or a lack of interest in such. And with emotions in your body that are appropriate to what you've been experiencing in the dream, in the sleeping state. Of course, if the memory of the dream is still with you, then the body is reacting, continuing to react in the waking state. And your day starts then, if you like, with a particular, from a particular angle, doesn't it? Could be concerned or disquieted or very happy or of course if it's what we would have called a superconscious wonderful experience or vision, then the day starts elated in that way. Because the feelings are the engagement of the body in the experience of the mind. The feelings are typically in the dream, in the sleeping state, and there's a consciousness of the feelings that go with the thoughts that you're preoccupied with in that state. Now, as far as I know, they don't include pain. I don't think I can remember being actually in pain. All the emotions like fear and fascination and joy and, there's pleasures, so to speak, but not bodily pain. I think most people, I suspect all, if they truly fall asleep, they avoid the pain while asleep. The pain may hit them very quickly on waking, of course. The body may still be sending signals. But when you wake, you receive this dominance of signals from the waking world, which is the selection of thoughts that you've got access to use or otherwise in the waking state. what limits the access of thought, whether in waking or sleeping state, are not clear, except that in some sense I'm concerned that it may be the clearer or deeper effect or consequence from your current concerns of living. So in living you may be having financial stress, preoccupied your mind with such, and this sort of creeps into the dream, the sleeping state, and you might access different consequences of such in the sleeping state than you seem to have access to in the waking state. It could be narrower, it could be different, it could be solutions even. You come, or not so much solutions, but more often the experience of the concern transformed into a different play, a different scene and act, that may trouble similarly or have relief in the sleeping state. And when you wake up, you say, "Oh, I dreamt so and so, and it was troublesome," and don't realise that really it was troublesome in a similar way to, or related to, the way your concerns have been going in the waking state as well. But not necessarily. You could be sleeping and dreaming of something that's rather surprising to you and doesn't seem to be related anyway to your current waking concerns and interests. Certainly is not manifested the same way. You're flying over some ocean or something, and it just seems an enigma of thought to you and not relevant. You dismiss it quite quickly. It happened while you were asleep, so you just say, "Oh, I was dreaming." If indeed you bother to even think that. So what I think has been labelled these subconscious and superconscious states are simply experiences of different access to the library of possible thoughts that, if you like, is potentially there for all of us, but we're accessing different selections of such thoughts. And you could have done it very deliberately by meditation or concentration on a particular imagination. In fact, imagination is again pushing into that library to flick open things that you hadn't had access before. We're constantly, in other words, selecting and reselecting different books, different possible constructions from the building blocks, the basic thoughts that are potentially there for us to draw on. And we might label it subconscious or superconscious state or waking state. The waking state is peculiar in that it's ongoing. We constantly come back to it. And we take that as to be the waking state. And because of its stability, we tend to strongly identify with that as the norm or who we are and what reality is and so on. The rest is dismissed as dreaming or visions or whatnot.
No, I think it is the case that what we construct, our access, if you like, to the one mind all thought is not quite like simply turning up a card with the appropriate picture on, but more a degree of facility of access of thinking and structures and storylines that are available to us and meaningful to us, at least in the context of the dream. Not too meaningful to us when we wake up from the dream, because we wake into another selection of abilities and insight, and they may or may not be able to fully accommodate what we've experienced in the dream, because they don't cover the same, it doesn't cover the same accessibility as you were specifically using in the dream. But the basic drift is that whatever we're thinking, whether it's in what we understand to be the waking state or the dream state or the vision state, the superconscious state, is really of the same character. It's what we are experiencing in the mind of God, using different selections from the mind of God. And not necessarily sections that he would be using, because he's accessing according to his values and therefore purposes and thought line, whereas we are exercising ours and learning in the sense of gaining attraction or aversion to certain ideas and situations according to our experience and such. Whether that experience be in the dream, reality, or superconscious state, whatever, it's all the same. The feature about reality is that it's a state that we seem to keep returning to, and it's therefore a play that is ongoingly shared with other persons, if you like, that are accessing God's mind. And we're interrelated in that we can share access in that state of consciousness with those of a similar experience. We're interchanging, we're relating. And of course what we're learning is in the what we take to be the conscious awake state, is we're learning interaction and basically the foundation of a valid morality or way of interacting with others that will be harmonious, so that we can ultimately function as part of the heavenly host, individual but in harmony, able to be given our freedom, because whatever we determine, we have the values that mean that what we determine is in harmony with all the others in the family. The ideal, in some sense. Whether we want that purely 100% or not, I'm not clear, as that is what good and healthy family life would be. Not sure about that. But certainly there's a level of disharmony that would be anything but heaven, wouldn't it? Be just war. And we need to be prepared so that we don't mess up the show. In some sense then, what we take as being awake is experiencing an access to a part of God's mind that we keep returning to and building on and influencing. And of course there's the power of prayer. In it one can appeal to God for access to a change in the reality that one's facing. You don't want illness, or you don't want poverty and so on, and so you're praying for such, and it can be accommodated, but it can be accommodated relatively slowly, in that it's going to be impact on others that are sharing this particular reality. And therefore we've got to take into account that it must be to their blessing, ideally, as it is to yours, supposedly. And so to change the dream, one has to press God, if you like, or the need or the desire quite strongly to constantly press upon the reality to change. And that's done by not just thinking what one would like, but also imagining, in other words, exercising such a thought while in this case, the waking state, so that that has to be accommodated in some sense into the waking state. There's a lot of resistance to that because others are thinking the way they're thinking and expecting what they're expecting. So in some sense, the world around you may be what we take to be circumstances, calling an ongoing situation that you're desiring against. If you desire and persist strong enough, then there's a struggle, if you like, to change the play, to change the script, to change the scenery, to change the outcome of the play as perceived. And of course, how it actually turns out is not as was perceived by the person wanting such change. It's some adaptation or consequence of them wanting such a change. And that consequence might be very little impact at all, because there's strong pressure, preference, calling for the dream to be otherwise, or the reality in this case to be otherwise. When you're in the dream, you may have much greater sovereignty as regards who the players are and what they're doing, but you may have considerably an unwanted lack of control, or a control that's actually harmful to yourself and to the outcome of the dream, and you result in having something pretty stressful, even a nightmare, which you're generating yourself, but of course don't realize it. If you were to become conscious in the dream that God could exist, and that he would have the following features of values and so on, and that they are your values in the dream, then you might well impact on the dream quite quickly, and it change accordingly, because you will shift the dream so that you drop certain characters. So I'm not certain that you have complete sovereignty in the dream as to what you're dreaming, but you're certainly a major player, and the dream is not just of you, it's also, if you like, being monitored by God, and it's not just you in the dream that has the purpose, but also God, and God having a purpose for your true well-being as he well understands it, compared to your imagined well-being as you very poorly, weakly understand it, being just inexperienced in the field. You're a child of God. You're creating, but you're practicing and you're not very good at it yet. We're like that in life too, and we can change the dream. Jeff can scream at the demons to come out, and out they come, and the person goes out with their injury healed, or their depression gone, or whatever it is. But there may be other more fundamental things in the person that are still calling forth the old pattern of thought and behaviour and imagination, and that weighs against what you've just achieved, and the person drifts back into the old ways unless some fundamental change has taken place, and you're onto a new equilibrium, and a better one, of course, than before. Well, ideally better. There's something to be said for the fact that if you've impacted what God was not going to do, in what sense is it now a better outcome? Except that God's only assented to it as he devised a better outcome. And then you would be slightly pressed as to, well, why couldn't we have done that before? And foreseen the situation. So although you get miracles, I'm not clear that the miracles are to achieve what has been asked for, but may well be answered as requested for some other reason. In other words, the miracle was, why is this man sick? Oh, nothing to do with him or his parents sinning.
But that the glory of God might be made manifest through it, which was the Jesus' reply, of course.
Well, in some sense, ideally, then, what we're doing in living is building up mind associations. If I'm conscious that I'm also conscious of God, that my consciousness is always linked to the possibility of God's presence and who he is, this tethers my mind to his presence, his safety, constraint according to his values that are also being held in the picture, and the dreams or the reality or the visions unfold accordingly. So if I'm a Hindu, then I see God as Krishna perhaps, or my guru, or whatever it is. And it's these values that are always in the mix. And therefore, I have a certain safety. But if I'm in the habit of not thinking of God, of a certain set of values that are safe and good and a blessing, then my experience, what I'm pulling from the mind of God, is of course less of a blessing. We need rescue. From time to time we become unhinged, and for that we rely on a good external person coming to the rescue. Typically, of course, in our early life, a parent who picks us up and in some sense puts us in a different environment of thoughts and activities drawn from the mind of God. And we are able to develop and grow and progress and mature because of their constant help and intervention. And we may get used to their intervention in certain ways and immediately think of it, anticipate it. And that is our security when we would otherwise become, if you like, unhinged or in a chaotic, difficult situation. Their presence becomes part of our values. It's built into our association of thought. Which thoughts are tied to which? The experience of being us, part and parcel of our habits of association from the past that we still hold. Plus new, what we see to be helpful thoughts, blessings of more recent times. Thank you, Dad.